ESPN 1420, ESPN1420.com. As promised, joining me right now on the program is Ken Hanscom. He is the Chief Product Officer and COO at Invite Manager. You guys hear Tony Knopf from time to time from Invite Manager as well. Ken's an expert on the Olympics planning process, ticketing, and sponsorships. I guess my first question, Ken, is kind of looking back at the last Olympics. Was Rio de Janeiro, was it the worst host in the history of the Olympics?
It's clear that Rio missed their expectations, both in terms of the viewership and the legacy that they left behind, right? There's no secret about that. There's a lot of things that the IOC really, the International Olympic Committee really needs to do to make sure that they get it right for the next set of Olympics.
You mentioned what they left behind. What kind of after effects does that have? I see reports and stories about empty arenas and bad golf courses. I mean, how bad did Rio botch it?
Yeah, pretty bad. I mean, whether it's the iconic Maracanã Stadium, which for 4 months didn't have anyone taking care of it, letting it fall into disrepair, whether some of the swimming pool images that many of us saw, those things are not a good look for either Rio or the Olympics. And I think that's what we've seen through this, 2024 bid process, that, of course, Los Angeles and Paris have been a part of, is that a lot of cities are saying, you know what, after seeing what happened in Rio, I'm not sure if I want to be part of that, right? We've seen Hamburg, leave the process. We've seen Budapest leave the process. Obviously, Boston first before LA picked up the mantle. And then lastly, of course, Rome, Italy. So that's really just leaving us with two cities that are really looking at, hey, should I bid for, or I want to bid for, the 2024 Olympics?
ESPN1420 and .com. Before I dig into LA and Paris, you just mentioned the side effects and how much it didn't just hurt Rio, but the Olympics. When you look at the ticket prices and how short they were in Rio and sponsorships, was that because, like, what carried more weight, the host city or the Olympics, the IOC, the interest in the games?
I think there's a number of factors. The first one being is there was a lot of noise around, the fear around Zika, some of the problems that Rio was experiencing leading up to the games, which was a big part of that. When the events got going and you saw Michael Phelps out there winning and you saw Simone Biles and you saw, Bolt win his third, 100-meter in a row, right? There was a lot of energy and excitement, and there was a good amount of TV viewership and sponsorship, winnings associated with that. But a lot of it was that buildup, which really led to a lesser attendance. Roughly, 100,000 people less than expected ended up showing for those Rio 2016 games than were initially anticipated as part of the planning process, which gave us a lot of those empty seats that you saw during the games.
ESPN1420.com. So you mentioned L.A. and Paris, the only two in the bidding process. Is that a first? How rare is that?
We haven't seen something like this since 1984. After Montreal in 1976 and then Moscow in 1980, nobody wanted the 1984 Olympic Games. The U.S. and Los Angeles and New York at the time said, hey, we'd like to consider it. With the U.S. only being able to choose one city, that's when Los Angeles stepped in and said, hey, we'll take it. And arguably, when we took that, it became the most successful and most profitable, the only profitable games in Olympic history.
Is the IOC going to award, what are we looking at? Are we looking at just 2024, or are they going to award both right now, being that, hey, look, we've only got LA and Paris, and they're interested, so before things potentially get worse, let's just lock it in. Like, what are they thinking, and what are the two cities thinking in this process?
Yeah, publicly, both cities are saying it's LA, it's 2024 or nothing. But when you look at the factors, you start talking about them right there, with no other cities interested right now, and really no interest in 2028. That's a lot of what the discussion that's happening with the International Olympic Committee right now. There's a meeting tomorrow, June 9th, where it's the executive board meeting in Switzerland. This will be a big topic of discussion. Are we going to award one, or are we going to award two? And the reason you would consider awarding two is that you have two phenomenal cities bidding on it right now. If you look at the details of both proposals, they are both phenomenal with a combination of historical importance, emotional tie-ins, and a very responsible, at least fiscally, games planning cycle. So they'll have that meeting tomorrow. This will be discussed. They're looking for, people believe, basically a decision on whether or not they'll decide on one or two games, 2024 or 2024 and 2028, on July 9th. And that will lead into the annual session, which will happen on September 13th in Lima, Peru, where either one of the two cities will be selected for 2024, or they may, choose both. Another discussion that's happening is it sounds like people are looking for, if they do two, is for Paris to go first with 2024 and potentially to have LA go afterwards with 2028. But that does have a lot of things that still have to be worked out for that to happen.
Is the future of the Olympics trending up or down, in your opinion, Ken?
It really depends on how these next two Olympics go. Right now, I think after you see what happened in Rio, there's a lack of interest right now in Pyeongchang 2018, which is happening over in Korea. They're really looking to this 2024 and 2028 Olympic cycles to really, I think, revive and correct some of the excesses that we've seen in terms of both the bidding process and what some of these cities like Beijing and Sochi spent to make them happen.
How confident is the IOC in Tokyo coming up in 2020?
Well, the challenges that we're seeing with Tokyo is that they are already on a very expensive budget of roughly $20 billion, looking at significant overruns. Last year alone, they were trying to save $2 billion. Many of the new venues that are being created are either coming in at double the cost or triple the cost of what they started with, which is a part of the reason why both the Paris and Los Angeles bid look so compelling, because for Los Angeles, there are no new permanent venues being constructed. A couple of temporary venues, including an aquatic center, and very similarly with Paris, most of the venues are in place. Yes, they do have to build an athletes village as well as a broadcast center. But other than that, both bids appear to be very responsible as compared with Beijing, Sochi, Rio, and Tokyo, which happened during this kind of bidding frenzy heyday.
Ken Hanscom, you can follow him on Twitter at Ken Hanscom. Last question, Ken. Anything else tomorrow? I guess with this meeting that you said is taking place, highlight for us just how important this is in the grand scheme of things.
This is really the future of the Olympic movement. And when you look at the choices that are being made here, you have nobody, looking to bid for 2028. So what's really the focus of this executive board is traditionally their power has been around this, every 4 years of voting on the next city that does it. They're faced with a really difficult decision here, given two amazing bids, right? One Paris, very historical, right? 1924 was the last time they hosted. It will be the centennial for them. It was actually driven by the founder of the IOC, Pierre de Coubertin, who kind of his gift in going away was to put on those Paris Olympics. And then again, you have the LA side of it, which is, looking at 2024, it's going to be very, very profitable for LA. It makes use of a lot of the existing venues. And so the risk that they're really looking at is if we don't take both of these bids or we take one or the other and we don't choose on 2028, does LA or Paris not come back in 2020, and are we left without a candidacy for 2020, and then what do we do then? So that is really, the question they're facing. If they do select both of them, the great news there is, at least for the IOC, is they now have 11 years in which they can figure out, hey, how do we redo the process? How do we make it more affordable, more tolerable, and better not only for the athletes and the corporate sponsors, but also for the people of the cities? And that should give them the time frame they need in order to figure that out. And that's why my money right now is on they are going to decide to choose both a 2024 and 2028 city, and that decision will happen, either tomorrow's meeting or that meeting on July 9th. And then we'll see what happens come September 13th in Lima, Peru.
Very interesting stuff. Over the next few days, you could hear about L.A. earning the right to host the 2028 Summer Olympics. But sounds like they'll probably have a lot of risk management advisors there, and they'll try to decide risk versus reward and what works best. But for Ken Hanscom, an expert on it, he feels like the IOC is going to award both of them to Paris in 2024, L.A. in 2028. You're an expert on the Olympics planning process, on ticketing, on sponsorships, on many other things. Give him a follow on Twitter at Ken Hanscom. Hanscom is the last name, how you spell it. Chief Product Officer and COO at Invite Manager. Ken, appreciate the time, man. Thanks for the knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.